World leaders are absolutely furious at Donald Trump and his regime, and these world leaders are torching Trump and his regime after a G7 meeting took place on Friday in France. At this G7 meeting, Marco Rubio told everybody that we're likely not going to go back to where we were in the Strait of Hormuz before the war started. Then some of the ministers at this meeting said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, we're not expecting it to basically ever reopen to traffic as usual by the end of the war. Quote, after this thing ends, one of the immediate challenges we're going to face is an Iran that may decide that they want to set up a tolling system in the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, we know that, Marco Rubio. They're doing that already right now. Before this disastrous and catastrophic war started, they weren't controlling the Strait of Hormuz like that. Ships were able to get in and out, but not anymore. Not only that, but there is a far more extreme regime from the Islamic Republic currently controlling Iran. As Abigail Hashanor from Financial Times also writes, according to the S&P Global, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz right now is down 97% since the war started. And yes, Rubio telling journalists that the scenario of Iran continuing to control it would be a dangerous one to the world. So what are you doing about it other than creating these situations and then Donald Trump pretending that he's involved in negotiations with Iran when Iran's saying, we're not negotiating with you. We've given you our non-negotiables. We're not talking about ballistic missiles. We're never giving up the Strait of Hormuz. We want to enrich uranium in the future. We need full reparations. We need security guarantees that you're not going to attack Iran or Hezbollah or any of our proxies. If you don't agree to those things, we don't even want to talk to you. And then Donald Trump and his regime are like, we're talking, we're having productive conversations. And then the Iranian leadership are like, there's so much fake news and disinformation coming from them that literally every single word is a lie. Now, during this, and by the way, that's coming from Iran. And then we know that Donald Trump is lying because we hear every word and syllable out of the guy's mouth is a lie. There was actually a screaming match that took place at the G7 between Marco Rubio and EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas. And she stood up to Rubio during this G7 meeting, and she was basically saying, you promised you were going to be tough against Russia. You've only gotten weaker and weaker. We remember, Rubio, when you were here exactly a year ago and you said you were going to be tough, and now you're removing sanctions from Russian oil while Russia's out there targeting the United States in Iran and your military bases? Like, what in the world are you doing? Meanwhile, we're hearing from Iran's foreign minister, Araghchi, saying Israel hit two of Iran's largest steel factories yesterday morning, a power plant and a civilian nuclear site, among other infrastructure. Israel claims it acted in coordination with the U.S. This attack contradicts Trump, claiming that he's extending a deadline for diplomacy. Iran will exact a heavy price for Israeli and American crimes. And then throughout the evening last night and into the morning, we saw Iran striking Bahrain. They hit a American military base in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. There were 12 injured, 2 seriously injured Americans as of this recording. We also learned on that same base where they have some of these strato tankers, there were 14 serious injuries in the past week or so. Unclear who was injured at this base. But it is important to note that we also saw over Tel Aviv, you can see some of these Iranian ballistic missiles and some of their newer cluster missiles. You can see this happening over Tel Aviv right away. And one of the things we'd be remiss if we don't mention here, and then I'll get back to some of the G7 conversations with some of the European allies, what others are saying in a moment as well. MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, basically put all of his chips, if you will, into the Trump security umbrella basket, right? Saudi Arabia went all in, giving Jared Kushner's private equity firm money, doing the Trump Tower this, the Trump that, giving Trump all this money, the Live Golf Tournament. I mean, all of it, believing that Donald Trump was going to protect him and that alliance was financially valuable, militarily valuable for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But as The Guardian points out, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, has lost the bet on all of his investments over the last several years. Eli Gurnemaya, senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, explained he financially invested in Trump and Trump's family and Trump Corporation and Trump White House. But at the end of the day, the views of the Saudis and the whole Gulf have been sidelined by the wishes of Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel over Saudi Arabia. Just again, pointing out some of these strikes going out over Bahrain. Others are claiming a Bapco refinery complex was struck by Iran. I want to talk about the leader of Finland, Alexander Stubb. And Alexander Stubb, kind of always known as being like a more reserved guy, somebody who, doesn't get into, he's very, very careful with his language. He's basically saying that the Iran war now threatens a massive global recession and that people don't fully appreciate the extent of this massive global recession. Finland's president, Alexander Stubb, says he believes his friends can cope with what he calls tough love. One of Europe's great optimists is not hiding his unusually bleak assessment here. The Iran war, he said in an exclusive interview, risks triggering a self-inflicted global recession that could have far more severe consequences for the economy than the coronavirus pandemic. And with Ukraine peace talks seemingly indefinitely stalled now as a result of this war in the Middle East, this unlawful war by Donald Trump. Conflicts are now raging in Europe and the Middle East, and basically the entire world is in a war. He didn't want to call it a world war yet, but the entire world is in a war. I want to share with you right now the head of Europe's central bank, Christine Lagarde, saying that the damage to the global economy at this point is basically already done. She spoke with The Economist, and she says people don't really have an idea how bad things are. She says with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, with the oil supply shock, LNG supply shock, helium supply shock, fertilizer supply shock. And again, the helium goes into chip fabricators, right? And, all this stuff is used, for have different uses. I mean, the LNG, it's used on, a ton of everyday things. Even if the war ended today, the war's over. Let's just say that happened, which it's not. There's nowhere near being brought to an end. At this stage, there's the damage has been inflicted. And now it's just going to ripple and ripple and ripple and ripple on. That's what's happening. Let me just share with you what she said right here. Let's play this clip of how she describes it in very grim terms. Here, play this clip.
We are facing a real shock that is probably beyond what we can imagine at the moment.
I would agree with that. I mean, I look at financial markets and I think there's some kind of cognitive dissonance going on. Do you think there is just a sort of blind optimism that somehow this is going to be over and the world will go back to normal and people are going to suddenly wake up? Or will it be a gradual realization that there are going to be really significant consequences?
Well, maybe they're overly optimistic and determined to stay optimistic in the hope that the positive scenario will materialize and we will be back to normal in relatively short time, which is not what the technical experts are telling us in terms of capacity, extraction, refinery, distribution, because too much has already been damaged and there is no way that it can be restored in a matter of months. Most people are actually talking about years. What I think might also happen, because we've experienced it, is that you understand the actual consequences gradually as you read through the facts, the supply chain consequences, the kind of raw materials that is critically important for particular manufacturing. I'll give you an example. Helium, which transits through the Strait of Hormuz, is critically important for microchips. Well, unless you figured that out, you're not certain that there will be instant or very relatively quick consequences on the cost of microchips because of the rarity that will result from not having available one of the raw materials. And I think this is a crisis where we are learning almost bit by bit, day by day, what the actual consequences will be, what countries will be most affected, what of the commodities will be the most in demand.
So this story is absolutely insane. Trump is taking $1 billion in taxpayer money and handing it to a French energy giant to cancel offshore wind farms and instead boost oil and gas production here in the United States. So give me a minute to update you on this because it's flying under the radar and we need to keep climate issues front and center. Here's what's happening. The Trump administration is paying nearly $1 billion to Total Energies to walk away from 2 major offshore wind projects, one off New York and one off North Carolina. These projects would have powered over 1 million homes with clean energy. Now they're gone. And what do we get in return? The company takes that same money and invests it into fossil fuels, more oil drilling in the Gulf, more natural gas exports out of Texas, more gas-powered plants. So let's be clear about what's happening. Taxpayer dollars are being used to kill clean energy projects and double down on fossil fuels, the very thing driving climate change. Even state leaders right now are calling this outrageous, saying that we're literally paying a company not to build renewable energy. And this, of course, comes at a time when global instability is already driving up oil prices, when experts say investing in renewables actually makes us more secure, not less. So yeah, this is a really, really big deal. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. What do you think about using taxpayer money this way? Should we be investing in clean energy instead of shutting it down? Let's get this conversation going. It's so important that you stay loud. I look forward to reading your comments. Ben, back to you.
Now, the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, said the following: the Americans, and this his takeaway from the G7 meeting, the Americans and the Israelis are getting more deeply entangled in this conflict every single day. And in my view, they don't have a strategy. This is not a NATO war. There would have to be procedures within NATO that are established, processes, and none of them were followed here. Trump and Netanyahu just went it alone and invaded Iran. What Trump is doing right now is not de-escalation, Merz explains. It's not de-escalation. Trying to achieve a peaceful solution is not what he's trying to do. This is a massive escalation we're seeing with an open outcome. And then he goes on to say, is regime change really the goal? Because if that is the goal, I don't believe that they will achieve it. In Afghanistan, it took 20 years, and the regime change was from one mullah regime to another. And again, you see what Rubio is saying. You see what Trump is saying. They're not even really talking about regime. They're like, we did regime change, right? They're just like, all right, we'll cut some deal with Iran where they still control these Strait of Hormuz. And all of the Arab neighbors are like, no, what are you talking about right now? You got us into this mess. I mean, you've got like certain Arab nations saying, just end this war right now. Just stop it. Like we need to have closure. There are other Arab nations that saying, like Saudi Arabia and others, like United Arab Emirates, like, United States, you can't leave now. If you don't just actually obliterate Iran and blow it off the map, we're screwed because Iran's stronger than ever right now. So you can't abandon us. So they've got these kind of different tension points right here taking place. And I'll just show you as well. And this is just a fact of this war. So now Hezbollah is using these FPV model attack drones to target Israeli tanks as well. And they're using certain technology as well that don't allow these drones to be jammed. And so Iran is sharing their drone technology with their neighbors. And, as we're seeing in these American military bases that have been evacuated, 13 of them have been basically evacuated. The ones that haven't been evacuated are still coming under attack by Iran. These Iranian Shaheeds, FPVs, and ballistic missiles and the new cluster munitions are very difficult to stop. I mean, Rubio told the G7 ministers that the war with Iran is likely to continue for another 2 to 4 weeks, extending beyond earlier expectations from Trump, because Trump lies about everything. But remember what they said with COVID, like a miracle, it's going to go away, bend the curve. By Easter, it's not going to go away. So 2 to 4 weeks will become another 4 weeks and 8 weeks. And this thing will continue to drag on. And Iran says, there's nothing for us to respond to in terms of negotiation with Trump. We've given our response. We've given our non-negotiables. There's nothing else for us to talk about right now. So what are you even saying right here? Meanwhile, let me show you what Marco Rubio was saying after this G7 meeting in France. So he kind of attacks Zelensky, and the reporter says, so what we're hearing is that the U.S. is telling Zelensky that security guarantees depend on withdrawal from Donbass. And Rubio's like, that's a lie. That's not what we're telling him. So the reporter's like, so who's telling them that? And then Rubio's like, well, we're telling him that, but we're just communicating on behalf of Russia. We're just sharing Russia's position with Ukraine. We're just in the middle. Hey, Rubio, what do you mean you're just in the middle? Russia is trying to kill our troops. Russia is attacking Americans. What do you mean you're in the middle? And the reality is that not only does Rubio and Trump see no difference between Russia and Ukraine, but clearly Trump and MAGA roots for Russia over Ukraine. They just had the Russian Duma, right? The top Russian Senate officials were in Capitol Hill meeting with the MAGA Republicans and the State Department, right? As Trump's State Department is meeting with all of these right-wing pro-Putin groups that seek to destroy the European Union, Europe, as Trump's trying to prop up Orban, Trump and his top officials and MAGA Republicans in Congress meet with sanctioned Duma members like the Russian senators, these Duma members who are walking around in Congress. By the way, just so you can see what Rubio said, here's what Rubio said. Let's play this clip.
Did the U.S. tell Zelensky that security guarantees depend on withdrawal from Donbass?
That's a lie. And I saw him say that, and it's unfortunate he would say that because he knows that's not true, and that's not what he was told. What he was told is the obvious. Security guarantees are not going to kick in until there's an end to a war, because otherwise you're getting yourself involved in the war. Okay, what is a security guarantee? It is troops that are willing to step in and secure. If you put that in place now, that means you're injecting yourself in the war. What he was told very clearly, and he should have understood it, is that security guarantees come only after there is an end to the war. But that was not attached to unless he gives up territory. I don't know why he says these things. They're just not true.
What is the U.S. position on Donbass?
We've told the Ukrainian side what the Russians are insisting on. We're not advocating for it. We've explained it to them. It's their choice to make. It's not for us to make for them. We've never told them they have to take it or leave it. The role we have played is to try to figure out what both sides want and see if we can bridge the middle ground. The decision ultimately is up to Ukraine. If they don't want to make certain decisions or certain concessions, then the war keeps going.
Also, here is Marco Rubio on Iran saying that, Iran's going around saying that they control the Strait of Hormuz. We can't let that happen, but, that may be the outcome of all of this, that they control it right now. Here, play this clip.
We're talking about this. There are some in the Iranian regime that are going around saying that they want to make the Strait of Hormuz tolling thing, they want to make it permanent. That's unacceptable. The whole world should be outraged by it. We're impacted by it a little bit, but the rest of the world is impacted by it a lot more, including many of the countries represented today here at the G7. And so if those countries are deeply impacted by it, all we've said is, you guys need to do something about it. We'll help you, but you guys are going to need to be ready to do something about it. Because when this conflict and when this operation ends, if the Iranians decide, well, now we control the Straits of Hormuz, and you can only go through here if you pay us, and if we allow you to, that's not only is it illegal under international law and maritime law, it's unacceptable. And that can't be allowed to exist. And so what we've said is that the countries that are most impacted by that should be willing to do something about it, and we'll help them.
So obviously the Europeans think that this is so utterly weak and pathetic right now. You had Donald Trump yesterday attacking NATO. We have the clip of Trump saying, NATO wasn't there for us, so I'm not going to help NATO ever again. Let's play this clip.
Because we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on NATO, hundreds of protecting them. And we would have always been there for them. But now, based on their actions, I guess we don't have to be, do we?
Mr. President.
That sounds like a breaking story, yes, sir. Is that breaking news? I think we just have breaking news. But that's the fact. I've been saying that. Why would we be there for them if they're not there for us? They weren't there for us.
And then you had Donald Trump saying, and after Iran, I'm going to invade Cuba next. Cuba, you're next, everybody. Here, play this clip.
It's like you wouldn't have to use. I built this great military. I said, you'll never have to use it. But sometimes you have to use it. And Cuba's next, by the way. But Pretend I didn't say that, please. Pretend I didn't say that. Please, 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 media, please disregard that statement. Thank you very much.
Cuba, you're next, seriously? Meanwhile, the price of Brent crude surging $114 a barrel right now. American markets are crashing. Inflation is surging. America is in a jobs recession right now. And you've got people like Iranian's parliament leader, MB Ghalibaf. He goes, the U.S. have spammed so much fake news trying to push energy prices down that the markets are just numb now. Keep going. Nobody's buying it anymore. The real prices will show up anyway. Powerful, maybe, but smart, not even close. Burn the fake news card way too early. Burn the fake news card way too early is what the leader of the Iranian parliament is saying to the United States publicly. There you have it. Let me know what you all think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.